Welcome to the Board of Health meeting of January 30th, 2023. Please note this meeting is recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording this meeting, please notify the chairman. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of March 12, 2020 and July 15th, 2022, orders suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20 until March 31st, 2023. This meeting of the Chatham Board of Health is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling 1-508-945-4410 and conference ID 879-216-585#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Now I'll turn the meeting over to Chairman Noble Hanson.
It shall be the policy of this board to conduct its meetings under the open meetings law so as to encourage public participation whenever time permits and as part of agenda item discussions. So we have four things on the agenda tonight, and first we'll establish a quorum. So as I call your name, say here, or say your name. Ron? Here. John Beckley?
Here.
Carol Boyce?
Here.
Noble Hanson, I'm here, and I guess Carol Gordon?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, first on the agenda is a variance hearing for the Martha J.F. Meyer Revocable Trust, 977 Orleans Road, Clark Engineering. I see Mr. Clark is here.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, David Clark, Clark Engineering. Here on behalf of the Meyer family. We've owned this property since the 1960s, I believe. I believe it's the third generation that's in the house now. They have a failed Title V system. The existing system consists of a tank out to a leach field that is in the floodplain. So what we're proposing is to replace the one tank with a combination septic tank and a pump chamber, and then pump the effluent up to a new leach field located outside the floodplain. It is as far away from all resources as possible. We know that the Herring Run is the westerly boundary line of this property, and there's an extensive inland wetland associated with that, going all the way into Lover's Lake and Stillwater Pond. So, like I said, the soil absorption system as far away as possible. We have provided for safety mechanisms for the septic tank and the pump chamber, mainly that the covers will be brought to finished grade with watertight seals, bolted seals, so there's a good mechanical joint there, as well as specifications for the tank. We'll have an admixture to the concrete, which is a waterproofing, and also a second coat of exterior mastic sealer on the outside. And the tanks would be cast with what's called polylock boots, which are a waterproof connection. I think that's about it. The variances that we need, are to the coastal bank. Because the floodplain intersects a landform that's steeper than 4 to 1, there is a coastal bank along near the northeast corner of the property that intersects the house and then continues on to the south. So we're asking for variances from the setback requirements to the coastal bank. And finally, I do show buoyancy calculations showing that the tanks will stay in the ground in the case of a flood. That was a problem 30 years ago down Little Beach, where some of them decided not to stay in the ground. And the calculations that you see for the buoyancy are based upon worst-case scenario that the tanks are empty. Nobody pumps a septic tank just before a hurricane, but nonetheless, we looked at the worst-case scenario. The tanks are empty, and there's a flood.
Okay, did you say it's a failed Title V system now?
Yes. Yeah.
And then, is the house transferring, or it
Nope.
it
Staying in the family.
just failed? Okay, and there's no additional bedrooms, same house will exist. Open it up to the board for questions or discussions?
Dave, could you tell me how the vinyl flow barrier works?
That is strictly for breakout conditions, in that Title V states that you'll have 10 feet out from the top of the leaching field maintain that grade for at least 10 feet as a breakout precaution. So the idea of the vinyl flow barrier is that we're going to put it on the edge of the overdig in the substitute of that required distance. So if the system was in total failure, the effluent would be at the top of what you see in the profile, the top of the plastic chamber, and theoretically it could travel horizontally. It would hit the flow barrier and go down.
Okay.
Yeah, or prevent it from breaking out onto the surface.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, so it's a variance, there's no increase in bedrooms. The new Title V system is farther away from the wetland than the previous system. So it looks pretty straightforward. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the application, the variance.
I'll second.
And we have a second from Ron. Any comments from the public?
David, just clarification, can you describe what the two red lines are that go right through the new leach pit?
Sure.
Because I was trying to follow the 100-foot and the 200-foot,
Yep.
and it kind of
So
does a
we've
weird
got-
thing up there.
Yeah, so we have 4 resource areas on this property. The floodplain, this coastal bank associated with the floodplain, the bordering vegetated wetland to the herring run, and then the herring run itself is a river under the Rivers Act. So the line that goes through the leach trench on the left is the 200 feet from the herring run, which is the limit of the Rivers Act.
Okay.
And then the other line, let's see if it shows up on there. It's 50 feet from the top of the bank.
Okay.
And obviously, the 100 feet from the top of the bank would be off the property. So that's the variance we're asking for, is that one trench under the state regs is closer than 50 feet, and both trenches are closer than 100 feet under the local regs.
Okay.
And then isn't Riders Cove right across the street?
Yes.
Is there an offset from
There is,
Riders Cove itself?
there's a line that's perpendicular to the trenches. That is the 50 feet from the top of bank. That's right along the edge of the road. So that's the closest any resource area associated with Riders Cove is to the system. The cove itself is probably another 50 feet or so beyond that. I think it comes up real close to the street, right where the herring run is. It's probably its closest in that stretch.
Okay, other comments? Nothing from the public, so we have a motion. Maybe we can take a voice vote.
Do you want me to read the?
Oh, yes. Julia, read the conditions, please,
Just
into the
read
record.
conditions. The applicant should restrict the property to a maximum of 3 bedrooms and record the restriction on the deed at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. The applicant shall submit a copy of the executed deed restriction to the board. The engineer shall submit an engineered as-built plan, including as-built elevations, with a written certification that the system has been installed in accordance with the approved plan, and no alteration to the floor plan of the dwelling will be allowed without further review by the board or its agent.
Okay, maybe we can take a voice vote. All in favor of the variance, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? Okay, the variance is granted.
Thank you.
You're all set?
Just one more question from the owners. They've been reading up on the proposed changes to Title V because they're spending a significant amount of money for this system. They asked me if they should be putting IA technology in, and I said, probably not, because Chatham does have a wastewater management plan. Chatham is part of the Pleasant Bay Alliance that has a watershed management plan for that section of town. But they were curious as to where the town is in their negotiations with the state.
I was going to ask you that question, but I thought it might be a little tricky for you. But Bob, if you could weigh in on that, because we have in our packet a bunch of information about that very thing.
Yeah, we're not in any negotiations with the state. The state is still taking comment on their proposed reg changes for both Title V and the watershed permit. David's correct, the Pleasant Bay Alliance, part of their watershed covers this property, if you will. We submitted, when I say we, the Alliance submitted, I forget whether it was a 10 or 12-page comment letter to DEP on these proposed changes. Today's the deadline for comment, and DEP is going to take all the comments they receive. And I understand from various sources, they have received a plethora of comments from, every coastal community and whatnot that it impacts. It's also my understanding that they are making potential changes to this, or to the proposed regulations, for communities like Chatham that have a CWMP, Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, that basically covers the whole town. Some towns only do CWMPs for certain areas, not town-wide. But ours is town-wide, so I fully suspect that there will be some changes made. And then the other wrinkle in the whole situation is at least 2 legislators have filed a bill that would put this entire thing on hold and prevent DEP from putting forth these regulations. So there's still a lot of things up in the air with regard to this. But I would say it's probably safe to assume that we are going to do our darndest that citizens of Chatham would not have to go ahead and put IA systems in when we already have a CWMP that we're basically 12 years into implementation to the tune of over $150 million at this point. So, but you never know what a state agency may do.
And I'm sure you probably can't say for sure, but would you say the changes are good that the town of Chatham? It's unpredictable, I suppose,
think the chances are pretty good that Chatham and a number of other towns that have CWMPs, that's going to become their de facto watershed permit.
Right.
That's the way it should be done. Yes.
Right, okay. And so this was all done by Mass DEP, not by the legislature at all?
It was Mass DEP that came up with these proposed changes last summer. They put them out for public comment a couple of times. The comment period's been extended. But like I say, they're hearing so many comments, and legislatures, are hearing from their constituents that this is a huge financial burden, let alone the 5-year timeline. I mean, I look at David, and I have a couple of projects with David as an engineer right now that he can't get to for 6 months, let alone all of a sudden, you tell 250,000 property owners in Cape Cod that you've got to upgrade your septic system within 5 years. There's no way there's enough engineers, there's not enough installers. So, you know, that's what DEP is hearing loud and clear from a variety.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
Okay, and I think maybe, I have a question about variances, and I think maybe people listening to the meeting may have the same questions. I'm just wondering about where we give a lot of exceptions to variances, and I was wondering, how does that work? Because if they're required and then we give exceptions, could someone just explain that to me, please? Like,
So-
why?
Usually, we only give these variances for existing structures. Like this case is an existing house, they're not adding flow. They did have a Title V variance to offset to wetland resource areas. If it was new construction or they were adding flow, we wouldn't, maybe if they were adding flow, we would have actually made them put an IA septic system in. But new construction, we wouldn't give those types of variances. So you can't deny people the use of their property. So in this type of a variance scenario, you kind of have to.
Because I know a lot of it's 100 feet, and then they take the variance from there. And it seems if it's 100 feet, why don't they keep it 100 feet? You know?
Because they can't get 100 feet.
And it's
an
a
existing-
greater environmental gain here.
Right.
And if you have to kind of trade away the technical aspect of a variance in order to get a bigger environmental
Okay.
gain, that's the way you rationalize doing it.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you taking time to answer that. Okay.
No problem.
Okay, so we'll move on. The next thing on our agenda is an update to the short-term rental bylaw, which has now become a registration. So I will turn it over to Judy primarily, but maybe you can bring us up to date with the end of the working group, select board vote, and then in our packet, we have the current draft registration and regulation, and Judy's letter that covered the whole working group effort that went to the select board. And,
So, yeah, sorry.
and then, bottom line is the select board agreed with the working group recommendation that it would be a regulation done by the Board of Health. It would come back to us for discussion in our process, and we would go from there. So this is kind of a start to our process, I would say.
Yes, so at our last short-term rental work group, we voted on a draft regulation and a registration application, so to speak, and with the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they support the Board of Health behind this. So it went to, the Board of Selectmen took it up at their Tuesday meeting, last Tuesday. Bob was there and spoke, along with me, who presented what the short-term rental working group had put together, and you have a copy of it in your packet. They were very supportive of it, I felt. I think there were some concerns, but they definitely feel like it's worth moving forward. One of the things that we did add was a 3-year review period, which I think some of the working group felt that after 3 years, we should revisit the regulation and see what or if any changes are needed to the regulation moving forward. They see it as a data collecting process. We will be able to collect complaints, and they also asked that we create some type of a database with complaints that other, like police and fire, and we can all, and building can all add to, so that we all know who's getting complaints, what they're about, noise, fire safety, housing issues, et cetera, parking, whatever they may be. So that was basically it. I mean, I think they were pretty supportive of it. Noble did speak on his behalf, and they did vote to support our request for a full-time health inspector and housing inspector / administrator. So that was good as well. So now it's back in the Board of Health's hands. We can move forward with public hearings, and, you know, we may want to wait until the Finance Committee discusses our budget, and that, because we want to have the funds approved at town meeting before we really go forward, I think.
The motion that they made endorsing, providing the funding,
Yes,
was that binding then on the?
no.
On the, it wasn't, it was a recommendation.
Yeah, maybe Bob can talk about the process from here, because funding and an additional person beginning July 1 will impact how this thing rolls out, I think,
Yes,
Yeah.
perhaps.
So the way it works is, I submitted the request in the budget. It was basically put on hold until the working group made the presentation last week. The Board of Selectmen supported the additional staff person. That now goes through the Finance Committee. Well, the overall natural resource budget goes to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night. This may or may not come up, just because the board's already kind of weighed in on this position. It then goes to the Finance Committee, the entire budget. Now, whether the Finance Committee will pick out this particular position or not, there's no way to know at this point. That budget review at the Finance Committee is occurring on Thursday. Then it goes into the warrant, and then it goes to town meeting. Keep in mind that while you can't raise things at town meeting, you can cut budgets at town meeting. So nothing's ever done until town meeting votes. You know, it's conceivable that you could get town meeting and somebody who doesn't like this as a whole says, well, one way that I can, you know, stop it, if you will, is to vote down the request for the position. So, you know, there's no guarantee until town meeting votes it. But that would be the process.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Okay, two things. I noticed that they lowered the registration fee from 125 to 50. At one point, we had talked about 125, and it's now 50. Is that correct?
well, that's what they recommended,
Right,
yes.
yeah.
It's just about enough to cover the full-time position.
Exactly. I just wondered. And also, I thought that it didn't have to go before a town meeting because it was going to be a regulation instead of a bylaw.
The regulation goes, you vote on the regulation, but the staffing to provide the support, that's in the budget. So that has to go through the town meeting process.
Thank you.
Yeah, so did you say, Bob, that tomorrow night at the select board meeting, they vote on the,
Tomorrow night, they're taking up the whole natural resource department budget, of which this is all part of.
Gotcha.
So,
Right.
yeah, I don't, like I say, I don't think this particular position will come up in and of itself, because the board's already kind of weighed in last week and said they support it. But, you know, you never know until you get there exactly what the questions may be.
And then Thursday at the Finance.
Thursday is Thursday is the Finance Committee meeting.
and does the finance committee go position by position with a justification? Or do they-
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You know,
So are you at the finance committee to present the case?
yes, I'm there to present the natural resource budget along with the finance director. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and the fee that Carol brought up, so the working group, it was kind of a compromise,
Yep.
a very modest, moderate fee was what they proposed. There are other opinions, we may have our own opinion about the fee. Mr. Castro on the select board actually recommended a fee of $100. He said it at the vote, so that's yet to be discussed, I think.
Yeah, basically, it's back in your court now. You have the draft that the short-term rental group put forward. It's now back in your hands as the Board of Health to propose the regulation, which you could change however you want to change it. And then you have to go to public hearings, and then based on public comment, you may refine it even differently.
Right.
And then ultimately, you come out with something that you're comfortable voting on.
So if we were to discuss in a future discussion, changing the fee or what the fee should be, is there a way we get input back from the town about whether they would rather see a higher fee or just take it out of the, out of their general fund once
Well,
they?
it won't come out of the general fund, it would come out of the fee for this. What I would suggest is that you guys have your discussions about any topics that you want to bring up, like the fee, 50, 75, 100, 125, whatever. Have that discussion and make changes to the draft before you go to a public hearing.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, so if there's anything else you want to talk about, I know there was some discussion at the Board of Selectmen meeting about the date that it took effect and whether or not we wanted
there are
to
some other issues.
clarify the language there. I had left a note in the draft regarding people who rent for less than 14 days that I think your board may want to weigh in on. So I would suggest you try to go through and clean all those things up as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then take what you think is your final version to a public hearing. You'll get whatever public comments on that you may get. Based on those public comments, if it's relatively minor changes, you don't necessarily have to go to another public hearing. But if you're making some substantial change in response to the public comments, you may want to schedule a second public hearing just so that everybody's clear on where you finally ended up.
So in terms of the fee, we wouldn't get any more input from the select board of the town about the fee. That would be just strictly up to us.
No, you could, when you go to public hearing, you could hear from members of the Board of Selectmen.
Or do they
Either-
attend that, or are they individually, or as a?
They can attend individually if it's something that they're very concerned about or have a strong opinion on as a board. You could get a written comment, say, from the Board of Selectmen. They would have to discuss that at a public meeting and then take a vote on it. But they could vote to say, we don't think the fee should be more than, or something like that, or we think the sky should be red instead of blue. And they could do that as a full board, plus you could hear from individual members of the select board speaking on their own behalf.
Yeah.
Just like for your board, you can speak as individuals, or you can take a vote as a board and then have a position on something.
Yeah, so I think there are several things that we're going to have to think about it and maybe discuss. One is this, the 14-day issue about whether it's covered under our bylaw and how that relates to how the state deals with the 14-day thing. And maybe just, we're not going to have a full discussion now, but maybe Bob can or Judy can explain this 14-day thing that comes up from the state.
Yeah, the state regulation, and remember, the state's only registering. Remember, the state's only registering people for tax purposes. That's why you register with the state, so they can collect the tax. The state basically allows anybody who's renting for 14 days or less, they don't have to register. So
That's not right. They do have to register, but they don't have to pay
pay
any
the
taxes.
tax, I'm sorry, that's right. They have to register but not pay the tax.
That's the reason why we put that in there, is that we thought they didn't have to register, and they kind of threw it in at the
Right,
last
and I
minute.
checked it, yeah.
And yes,
So that the feeling of this working group and the philosophy of this is a registration with support of regulation. So my own opinion would, and we can discuss it more later, we would want everybody to register who's a short-term rental and not have the 14-day exclusion, but we can discuss that more. The other thing that came up from the select board was the legal language between when you start to register, which will be July 1st, 2023, it looks like, and when the regulations go into effect, which will be March of 2024, so it will be the summer after this, it'll come, that legal language or how that's written down, I think was an issue.
Yeah, but that's kind of backwards.
Yeah,
The regulation would take effect on July 1st, 2023. The regulation would take effect, but you wouldn't have to be registered until March of 2024. So you'd basically have 9 months to do the registration. All the other requirements of the regulation would not really kick in until March 1st.
Okay.
So you could register on September 10th of 2023, but all the other things that you're supposed to comply with, you wouldn't have to necessarily comply with those until March, although you're signing that affidavit, which says you're complying, so.
so I think for the future, it will be, and maybe it'll be up to legal counsel to get that language in there so it's very clear exactly what we're doing. And then one of the things in Judy's report was public relations and marketing and public relations to get information out to the residents about this thing. That'll be part of it, exactly how it's going to work, because it's a little confusing, I think.
So after the effectiveness date of the regulation, which will be July 1st, 2023, after that, but before March of the following spring, if there is a complaint at a rental unit that we get called on, or can we take action if it's clear to us that there's a gross exceedance of the rental property in terms of?
I think we're going to need more legal clarification on this.
Well, that's-
I mean, I wrote this with that in mind, that we could gather the information for 9 months. We were giving people all next summer to get their properties in order, and, because everybody's already, rented out their properties for next summer. So, but I think the effective date is going to be something that we're going to have to talk to legal counsel.
Right,
It was
so
brought
we-
up by one of the select board members who felt that this was not,
So we could not compel somebody in, say, August or September, to do anything regarding registration, because they haven't been required to do so at that time.
right.
But
That's the
if
way I
we
saw it.
have a gross violation of one of the parts of the regulation that has since gone into effect, do we have enforcement authority on that issue?
I don't think so, but
Okay,
we would have authority to notify them of what the rules were. It would depend on what the complaint was.
okay.
If it was,
Just
but I
whether
think-
they have the force and effect of law or not, I guess.
You would have the same enforcement authority that
That
you
we
have
have
today.
now,
So if
right.
they were violating a Title V or a housing code or something.
Right.
They could be cited
talking
under that.
about-
They couldn't necessarily be cited specifically under this yet, but that we can clarify with town council.
Okay, I'm talking about an occupancy limit.
Yeah.
That we don't now have the ability to enforce if we were confronted during that.
I don't think we would until they were registered, but
Okay,
I think those are things that we need to definitely
so
work out.
let's think about the timing of the effectiveness of the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, so that'll be the town council helping get the language straight so it's perfectly clear.
Yes.
And the other thing, just quickly, the parking, language, street parking, I think that'll be a town council thing too, or maybe the police department, but exactly what the bylaw is, can and can't, and what the language should be there. I happen to talk, well, I think it might not be a strict bylaw about no street parking, but we probably have the authority to put that in and
This
enforce it.
language that's in here regarding parking came from the police chief.
okay,
That's specifically why it makes a distinction of, there's certain things that apply to town roads, there's certain things that apply to private roads and town roads. That's why it's broken up into the two parts, because that was a question that we had a while back, and I had gotten language from the police chief that we can do this on public roads, we could do this on public and private roads.
And that's from a bylaw, is that?
Yeah, well, it's from the town's parking regulations, which go back to 1955.
Right, yeah.
So, but one of the things that we mentioned at the select board meeting was that this regulation in its entirety has not yet been reviewed by town council.
Right.
We wanted to kind of see what the short-term group came up.
Yep.
See if you guys have anything major you want to change, and then we were going to send it over to town council for his review.
Right, and they could see that bylaw, with that language is proper there, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so those were the.
let me just make one
big issues.
final
Yeah.
final comment that this process that Judy ushered through was very successful. And I thought it was a tribute to Judy's temperament. And everybody who was there's interest in trying to be cordial, respectful, and flexible where reasonable and needed, showed through. And I think it was a very good process that we followed. And I just think my hat's off to Judy for bringing this home, because at the end of the day, both the working group and the select board have made a vote of confidence in the Board of Health. They trust us, and they made that known through their voting.
Well, I'll just add, it's not only Judy's temperament, but her skill in doing this, so, but I think, I agree with you. But this group was very diverse when we started. It looked stacked against this, I'll say for myself, against the short-term rental bylaw. There were people renting and people in the business, and then it went over to regulation, and then the whole group came together. So it was a pretty good process, and it was a lot of work. 2 hours, 3 hour meetings for, I don't know, we had maybe half a dozen meetings. So I agree with John completely.
A comment from the public?
Comment from the public on short-term rental bylaw or registration?
Elaine?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I also would ditto what was said. I commend the Board of Health for taking this on. I think it was long overdue. And compared to pretty much anything else that goes on in town, this has gone through very quickly. I do have some comments that I'd like you to consider before the public hearing in terms of any changes that should be made. One is that I absolutely think you should consider, if necessary, raising the fee enough to cover a person. I think that, I think it's unfortunate with the way we spend money in town that some people are balking at spending, you know, whatever the number is, 50, 75,000 for this program, because it impacts so many things in the town in terms of quality of life and water, et cetera. So maybe that's something to consider. Also, you talked about the 14-day issue, and I thought I had heard, as Judy said, that the state does require people at 14 days to register, but there was a question about them not having to register in the town. I absolutely think, I agree with the chairman, that has to happen, because it kind of defeats the whole purpose. When they fill out their registration form, they could say, or they wouldn't fill it out and say, well, at the time, I only thought I was going to rent for 2 weeks. And it puts the butters and the town in general having to count, you know, well, that wasn't 2 weeks. There have been people in there for 10. So to be consistent, I think that there should not be a 14-day exemption. There was something else that was said. The select board, I was very pleased they voted 4-1. But there was something that was said that I think was misleading to the public by the select board member who voted against it. And I don't know if it's his misunderstanding of the way it works, or if the general public who hasn't been following it actually believed it. He had said that currently at 4% that we're taking in on the registered 1,300, that's 1.5 million in revenue to the town currently. And then he said, quote, that's 45 million income coming into the town, a significant economic factor to the town, unquote. Now, that was misleading in my view. That revenue is not coming into the town. That is going to the landlords who are not spending it in the town because they're not here, because they're renting their houses out. So that if somebody heard 45 million, they would say, wow, that's incredible. This is a good thing. Just to put it in perspective, the operating budget for Chatham is 35 million. You know, that's not the capital expenditures, but the operating budget. So 45 million is a huge number, and with all the consequent impact of that on the town in terms of our services. And then finally, I hope you consider, apparently the big issue now with some people who are opposed to it is, well, how many people have really complained? And I think I had said at a previous meeting that people didn't complain because there were no regulations. We didn't know who to complain to, what regulations were being broken, just that it wasn't right. But at the same time, there is the concern when you have rental properties in neighborhoods and the owners of those properties live in California, let's say. Who do you go to? And it puts the onus, again, on neighbors to complain about neighbors. That is a really bad precedent. So what I would hope that your staff would look into is a way where the list is available in a user-friendly form where the townspeople can just look up an address and say, yep, that's a rental property, and then be able to notify the town and ask that you come out and check it. But to be anonymous if possible, because, you know, if you have a lot of angry tenants living next door and you reported them, it only exacerbates the problem. It's an untenable position for people who live in areas where they are surrounded by rental properties to be in. So I would hope you would find a mechanism because now we're saying, well, we're going to count how many there are going to be over the next 3 years to see if it's really a problem. People don't like to complain. People don't like to call the police. They don't want to do that. We have to live in this community. So there has to be a way to set it up so that you can get the data, but not at the expense of the people who have to live here. So those are my only comments for now. And again, super job. I think you're definitely headed in the right direction. And I do like the fact that you're moving forward on the regulation and inspection. I think it's a really good thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. Yeah, the complaints, I had a question. Will the Board of Health act on an anonymous complaint about something going wrong without a name identified?
We do, yep. But again, we have to have access to properties, we can't just barge in, so if we do get an anonymous complaint, we have to arrange to enter the property by the owner or the tenant, so.
Right. And then part of this will be a database that will be public information, I'm sure. It'll be on the
Everything will be
website.
public information, yep.
And then the other thing, I believe the number was 17 million that the town got in the last year from the state on the short-term rental bylaw, and then it was increased by 50% in January, and that money's going to the elementary school and affordable housing. So if I might be wrong, but I think so. That's even more this coming year.
It wasn't 17 million.
That's too many.
I think it was 1.7 million.
1.7 million,
Right.
sorry, yeah. Right.
Right,
1.7.
it generated 45 million in revenue to the landlords, but it was 1.5 million. And that will go up with the extra 6%, but that is being reallocated to specific issues in town.
Okay, good. Other comments on the short-term rental bylaw from the public, or?
I see-
So it'll be an agenda item for us next week, so people can look. Okay, good. So we can move on to the item 3, update, John McGrath, 32 Mill Hill Road. And maybe Judy can,
I can start. The signs have been put up all the way down to Dusty Miller Road by DPW saying no parking on the road, so that's done. I emailed our contact at DEP. He got back to me and said that they are in the process of sending out the order to correct and that we will be copied on that. That's all he said. He did give me the name of a new contact that I will be dealing with moving forward. Sounds like now that he's done his part, it moves into,
To an enforcement liaison.
yeah, it sounded like that. So I thanked him and copied the woman who he had handed me off to and said, let me know, what more information you need, if any, and told them that nothing had changed. So that's.
What's your read on timing here? Hard?
I mean, it sounded like it's in process, so,
Right.
I mean, I know
Pretty
legal stuff takes a long time, so.
Right.
I'm hoping by the end of the month, well, it's already the end of the month, so,
Yeah, right.
yeah. Mid-February, maybe?
But it is progressing in
It's-
process-wise. It is moving forward.
Yeah.
Carol?
Okay, so apparently, and I don't know if any of you have seen the pictures or anything, but these pictures came to me about Barn Hill Road. So now what he's doing, I don't know if you've seen there or not, but apparently what he's doing is he's moving his things over to Barn Hill Road to really create more of a statement there. And this is something that we don't need DEP. We just can we not just go in and use the money that we have and clean this up and just, give him 30 days to clean it up, which he won't, and then.
We're following up on that with conservation and all as we speak. We're following up on that now.
Okay, oh, good, okay.
Yeah, in terms, because he's in violation of the Wetlands Protection Act and this, that, and the other thing, so, yeah. And, you know, when we started down this road to 32 Mill Hill, this is what I think some of us at the staff level were afraid of, that he would simply move it to another location, which is exactly what he's doing,
Okay,
so.
but you're working on that?
Yes.
Do you see anything, a time period at all that'll be?
I'd love to
Rectified?
tell you that it's going to be tomorrow, but it's not going to be tomorrow. Yeah, there's just process we have to go through, just like the state has to go through. I don't want to say they're more diligent, but, you know, they're talking fines that are significantly higher, so they have a lot more lawyers involved on their side, so it tends to take things a little more slowly on the state. But, yeah, we'll be sending a letter to Mr. McGrath and telling him what he's in violation of and giving him a time period to clean it up, and I don't.
Is this under your purview?
Well, but-
Is this authority under your
Con-
purview?
Conservation's under my purview, yes,
Okay.
so we'll be dealing with it under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Is there, and I don't know if there is, but is there any way that we can help? I mean, the people in that neighborhood, he is harassing them like crazy. And a lot of them are very much afraid of what he's going to do at some point. And they've tried to call the police and things like this, but that probably doesn't fall under Board of Health jurisdiction.
Yeah, the
but,
best thing they can do if they have any issues with him in that vein is to call the police. And, you know, there were similar issues up on Mill Hill with some of his neighbors as well, and, you know, and, you know, he was here before the Board of Health, and there were some instances when things got a little interesting, you know, at some of the Board of Health meetings as well. So, yeah, it's just unfortunate, but it's what we have to deal with.
Well, I'm glad this is going to be cleaned up soon, and hopefully Mill Hill Road.
And you have adequate regulations that you can reference in the notice?
Yep.
And do those regulations have enforcement aspects?
Yeah, very similar to what Board of Health regulations have.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we could do administrative
Yeah.
actions if we wanted,
yeah.
or we could do an NOV or what,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, and we'll be working with town council, you know, because he's obviously very familiar with the 32 Mill Hill situation, and, you know, he's familiar with the other situation as well, so we'll just be trying to figure out the best way, you know, I kept hoping he'd move to Harwich, but it hasn't happened.
I have a question. Up at the Barn Hill Landing, does he own that property, or is it leased, or how is the area that he's putting the junk on is?
As far as I know, he owns that. It's kind of an interesting area. It's where the oyster shanties are that have been there since
Dirt.
God knows how long. The access road to get to the shanties actually crosses private property, but the shanties themselves are individual little lots. So it's kind of an interesting area, if you will. I was actually talking with the assessor about it last week. She came in to pick my brain on that area as well.
He has his kayak business at that area,
Yeah.
which would
But
be really
you could look at a
interesting if it looks like
deed.
this.
You could look at a town deed and you could see where his property
Yeah, yeah.
is.
Yeah, you can
How
look-
many feet back it goes.
Right, you
from-
can look at it on maps online, and they're actually little tiny squares. Each one of those shanties is a little tiny square. And then there's a road area in the middle between the shanties. It's called Shanty Road. But then there's a driveway from the shanties over towards Barn Hill that actually crosses two private properties that are, the
So-
houses are way up on the hill, but they go all the way down to Oyster River.
So the debris that he's currently placed on the ground could be on his property.
Yes.
It could also be on somebody else's property.
Yeah, without having it surveyed, but right now, based on what I saw, most of it's on his property.
Okay.
You know, without a survey, whether it's
Right.
stuff actually over the line, who knows? So, yeah.
Yeah, one thing about the signs that they put up on Mill Hill Road, it says no parking on either side, both sides. So originally, it looked like it was just going to be on his side, but it's on both sides.
Right.
And then the police officer who's taking charge of it said that once those signs were up, he would contact the neighbors and then would begin enforcing the no parking. So we should be pretty close to that.
Now, Mr. McGrath had been parking a white SUV along the edge,
White truck.
a white truck, I'm sorry, white truck. Is that a legal parking place now, or is that turned?
Last time I drove down there, he actually had that truck parked in where the driveway apron was. He had it crammed in there. The little open spot in the rail where there's a pathway, it's a good question. You know, it looks like it shouldn't be any parking there, that it's a pathway, it's not a driveway, but that would be up to.
Please to interpret that.
Yeah,
daughter to
if
sort of
it's,
working on
if it's
that.
on the road side of the guardrail, it's basically no parking zone. If he's got something parked there, he will get ticketed.
And if you-
Where that walkway down is, that.
Well, then there was his driveway, and that's where we've been trying to get him to park his truck and all.
Right.
It's in the
Last-
driveway off the road.
Yeah, that's where it was last time I went down there.
Okay.
Okay, other comments from the public or questions or comments? Mill Hill?
But do we know whether he's still bringing in more debris or whether it's static? Do we have pictures that, you know, we periodically take and compare to a month ago pictures?
We haven't been taking pictures, but it does appear like he loads his truck up and, you know, stuff seems to come and go. It's-
Yeah, nothing really seems to have changed. If not, some days it
Not
looks worse than others.
significant enough.
Right, no.
Yeah,
There may be minimal coming and going, but
No.
nothing significant.
I think the stuff in his truck comes and goes,
Yeah.
but I don't think that anything on the site is leaving.
Correct. So, and those may be recycling, outgoing recycling or incoming recycling. I don't
Yeah,
know.
Right. I
Okay.
don't know. Hard to
no
tell.
way to know, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But the debris or the stuff at Barn Hill Landing, I mean, it just appears to me that it's not material that's come from Mill Hill to there, it's just new stuff that has arrived there. That's my impression, although I don't have the evidence.
Hard to tell.
I think it may be a combination of both.
Okay. All right, other comments or questions on?
I had a question.
Yes.
On the shanty, the road to get to them. Doesn't he have stuff on the other side of the road? Kayaks and boats and? Yes, that's where it is. But wouldn't that be the private property?
No, that may be his property too. Just leave it on. That may be his property too on, you know, he's got one lot on this side and then another lot on the other side. I have to look at the map,
Okay.
take a look at it and let you know.
Okay, item 4 then is an update on COVID-19, and Dr. Duncanson, or?
I certainly can. So numbers are trending better. You know, numbers have been pretty much what they are over the last 6-7 months. They've been relatively static, if you will. But the most recent update from the state as of last Thursday, because remember, the state only issues data now on a weekly basis instead of daily basis. Our 14-day average daily incident rate was 18.4, Barnstable County was 15.5, and the state was 12.8, and we were the third highest of the 15 towns in the Cape. So, you know, we've kind of bounced around. We're either at the high end or we're at the low end. You know, and a lot of times it's not necessarily because our numbers have changed, it's because the other towns' numbers have changed. Because our numbers have been pretty consistently around the same area. For percent positivity, we are at 14.07. The county average is 11.7. The state is 10.5. We were the second highest town on the Cape for that one. So we're back up to, again, to being towards the top tier of the Cape towns, if you will. Hospitalizations are down. They were in the mid-20s at Cape Cod Hospital with people in regular wards and intensive care. They're now dropped down to 20, so, you know, not a huge drop, but they're going back down again. You know, I think we didn't see quite as much of a peak after the holiday period that kind of everybody was afraid of, which was good news, you know. We're still at around 66% of the people statewide that are in the hospital are fully vaccinated. And it's been right around that 2/3 for months now. The wastewater numbers at MWRA, both north and south, are both down, which is good news. The week before, the numbers in the northern, because MWRA's service area is divided into north and south, basically, with kind of Boston in the middle and then suburbs to the north, suburbs to the south. Last week, the northern suburbs were still going up, the southern suburbs were dropping, now they're both dropping. So we appear to have gone past the most recent peak, if you will. And then CDC is still carrying Barnstable County in their medium category. We were up in high for several weeks over the holiday period, and in the last 2-3 weeks, it's dropped down to medium. And they use statistics based on number of positive cases and number of hospitalizations to just basically come up with something that's easy for the public to understand, low, medium, high threat, so.
I was struck recently, within the last week, I read in the paper that in America, there continues to be 500 to 600 deaths every single day.
Yep.
Attributed to COVID. And I said, wow, that's like 2 plane loads of people going down every day.
Mm-hmm.
And we seem to be comfortable with that, I don't mean it
Yeah,
in a bad way, but we get desensitized. So we should be reminded
yes.
that there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are still dying every single day.
I think the thing to me that's really telling is, the bivalent vaccine has now been out since last September. And in the US, only about 15% of the population has had the bivalent booster. The US has about 85% of people that are vaccinated with the first 2 shots, if you will, but only about 15% have gone to get that booster shot. And that's one of the lowest percentages worldwide, except for, countries where the vaccines just simply haven't been available, period. But in Europe and all, the number of populations that have had the first dose and then a bivalent booster is significantly higher than it is in the US. And I think you're right, I think it's just because a lot of people have gotten kind of COVID worn out, and they don't want to bother wearing masks, they don't want to bother getting vaccines.
Yep.
And I'm sure you all heard the latest guidance that the FDA Science Panel is currently reviewing. It would be yearly shot for COVID, very similar to the flu shot. So FDA would get together every spring, early summer with the manufacturers, try to make the best prognostication they can as to what the prevalent strain will be. That'll be made up, and then in the fall, you would basically get a COVID booster along with a flu booster or a flu shot. So
I wonder if they could ever combine both into one shot.
they could, they did last fall to some extent.
'Cause that would be even more efficient.
Yeah, obviously, and I'm sure if they can, they will. It's just manufacturing, They're still working on it. They're still working on different mRNA vaccines as well, so more to come. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think we're kind of getting to that level where everybody, I don't want to say necessarily complacent, because I've noticed in the last couple of weeks out in public, you see more people wearing masks. When there's been the publicity about it, higher on the Cape and whatnot. But I think a lot of people are just getting tired, and I don't blame them. I mean, we've been dealing with this for coming up on 4 years, so.
Comments from the public on COVID-19? Oh, all right, that's good. Thank you, Bob.
Minutes.
Any other,
Just one more thing, we did get our new supply of COVID test kits. So the ones that we've been handing out just expired on January 28th. So if anybody has those, they can just dispose of those in their trash. And they're welcome to come get ones that have the new date, which is, I think, in August, so their expiration date. So we have about 1,500 test kits available.
and I had one question. You sent out some documentation of a lead inspection, and I just had a question. What initiates a lead inspection of a residence? How does that happen?
So the state has a childhood lead poisoning prevention law, and any dwelling that is rented or that a child under the age of 6 lives in, they're required to have it de-leaded or just, they have to have it
Check for
de-leaded.
it.
They have to check for it and they have to have it de-leaded. So I'm a lead paint determinator, so someone in town who has a child had moved into a rental and was concerned and asked me to come over and do the initial inspection, which I did. And I don't think that there's a lot of lead in this house, but there may be some old windowsills that might have a little.
Do you still use those handheld machines that read the lead?
I don't have that machine. I was trained using a chemical. It's sodium sulfate.
You actually do a scraping?
You kind of just cut into it a little bit and you drop it in. It smells like rotten eggs. And we test up to 20 surfaces. If we find one positive, then the owner gets a letter saying he has to hire a certified lead inspector to come in and do it.
Abatement for-
And then do the whatever's required.
So is there a process where the rental owner has to get an inspection? Or is it rely on a complaint from somebody or initiated by somebody moving in with the child who's concerned? Is it automatic or is it by?
They're required by law to have, if there's a child under the age,
Who's the they?
the owner.
The owner.
So,
To have it tested and certified as lead-free?
right.
Okay.
So in this case, I could not find any record of that the state does keep records of any, all de-leading. So they can show me something if they have something that says that they had it tested and it was certified lead-free. So that's the next step if they have that. If not, they have to hire a lead paint inspector.
Wow.
So,
Good, interesting. All right, so nothing else, we can go on and approve the minutes of January 9th. Anybody have any additions or corrections or comments? And if,
I'll make a motion, we accept the draft minutes of January 9th.
second?
I'll second.
Okay, we can take a voice vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes of January 9th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so those minutes are accepted.
we have one hand up
Oh,
from the public. Do you want to?
yes.
Gloria?
Yes, thank you. It's Gloria Freeman. I want to ask for a future agenda item, if I may, that the board begin to consider the puddles or ponds, whatever they are, at Commerce Park. It seems it is definitely a health and safety issue, and it's in our water resource protection overlay district. So I think it's something that our Board of Health would want to look at. Excuse me. I too want to congratulate Judy Giorgio and Dr. Hansen and Mr. Beckley for a job well done on short-term rentals. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a good suggestion. And then I guess if we're ready, we can adjourn the meeting. Can I get a motion?
So move.
And second?
Second.
A vote, we can take a voice vote to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No,
Okay.
Hang around.
I think we're done.